If you're wondering why I was very light on the differences in the first season, it's because the first season's differences rely largely on the characters' characterization and their interactions with each other. As I said in the first video, the anime left a lot of room for the characters to breathe and grow naturally. A lot of people love the main story arcs, but most people love the series as a whole because we got to see the little things, like how Rei and Usagi just pissed each other off and clashed and fought all the time. We saw all the flaws of the girls and how they bugged each other, but at the same time, we learned about how they cared about each other and they encouraged each other to grow. Most importantly, Usagi matures in the manga. She has a few moments of relapse after her initial characterization as fearful and lazy, but for the most part, with each passing story act, she becomes more sure of herself and more willing and capable of doing what needs to be done. As Usagi accepts the fact that she is the only hope against all of these monsters, she starts to leave most of the crybaby tendencies behind and she becomes a capable leader and fighter. While Usagi does mature in the anime, for the most part we really seem to see more of her flaws. The manga continues her maturity growth without leaving us enough time to let us know that she's still a teenager. The show, on the other hand, seems to have this reset button at the end of every season, and at the beginning of the next one, she's just as I don't want to fight, oh my gosh, everything's so scary, what do I do, as she was at the beginning of last season. At the end of every arc, we see her really get herself together and she's competent and she's fighting, and then we lose all of it the next season. And this isn't necessarily a criticism because she is 14 years old, then 15, then 16. And everything is trying to kill you, and that is a genuinely terrifying thing. At the same time, it feels like she constantly needs reminders that she's the one that can actually, like, defeat the big bad of the day. She always needs to have Mamoru step in for at least 1 minute in every episode, and she is very easily distracted by all of the monster's tricks. The manga at least shows that she has to save Mamoru every other day, and because she's Usagi and she cares about everybody, she's usually the first one to think to act before anybody else does. Her relationships with her friends are largely unchanged, which is a blessing. She and Chibiusa still bicker with each other. It's more pronounced in the anime than the manga. Deep down though, Usagi remains the same throughout every incarnation. A sweet girl with enough love and compassion in her heart to change the world, who would die for her friends and family to know that they're all safe. The biggest difference in her anime and the manga is how her relationship with Mamoru is presented. In the manga, he's still in high school, whereas in the anime they aged him up to be into college. Now whether that means he's like a freshman or a sophomore in college, or if he's like getting ready to go to grad school, that's something that we're gonna have to debate about. And the relationship in the anime is not always shown in the most positive light, mostly because they dried up Mamoru's characterization, but I will get to that in a minute. The anime mostly portrays Usagi as being the instigator in the relationship, with Mamoru just kind of going along with it, and we're just supposed to assume that he cares as much about her as she does about him. But a lot of people don't think that he cares that much about her because of the goddamn breakup in season 2. So King Endymion, Mamoru's future self in the 30th century, decides, great idea, to send his past self prophetic visions of Usagi dying if they continue their relationship. So he decides to break up with her, which gives us the saddest scene in anime history.
Chibiusa 来てるんでしょ。もしかしてマモちゃん、私よりチビウサを好きになったんでしょ。
バカなこと言うなよ。
そうね。ごめんね、マモちゃん。今まで私に付き合わせちゃって。
すまない、うさこ。
ママ、ごめんね。もうマモちゃん、うちに連れて行けなくなっちゃった。
Meanwhile, in Happy Manga Land, they're just going at it right there on the kitchen floor. And in the manga, the biggest bump in their relationship at this point is that Mamoru is paying way too much attention to Chibiusa, and Usagi is kind of jealous about that, but it's just because that he's her father, but he doesn't know that, and he's just kind of reacting to that paternal feeling, and then, you know, he and Usagi talk about it. And they get their feelings out in the open, and then they become closer and their relationship gets stronger because talking about your feelings, it helps sometimes. And like, the biggest problems really ever in the manga in their relationship is when either Usagi or Mamoru feel like they're dragging the other one down and they're feeling like they're not good enough for the other person and they're not trying to help them reach their fullest potential. Like, that's a really good problem to have in a relationship, that you just feel like you need to help the other person become better. So let's get to Mamoru's characterization. The manga heavily featured him as Usagi's main support. They fell in love very gradually before they even found out about their alter egos or their past lives. Frequently, in the final battles of every story arc, they're seen holding hands, and Usagi is like literally and emotionally being told, go do what you have to do. I've got your back, I will support you. He had this big emotional breakdown during the Infinity arc when she like threw herself into the Hellmouth. I know that's not what it actually was, but Hellmouth. And like he thought that she just decided, hey, I'm just gonna kill myself to save the world. He was a much more active participant in the Senshi meetings and investigations, and overall he just came off as this lovable little dweeb who was really good at pretending like he was cool. He got to have his own crystal and his own powers and his own sense of self-worth in the Dream arc after spending literally the entire arc going, I'm not good enough for my girlfriend, she's so awesome and I'm so dumb and why does she even like me, The anime took his status as kind of this silent support system and turned it into, I am an emotionless, introverted blob. Like, pretty often you kind of get the vibe that he could just barely tolerate being around Usagi. And a lot of the critics described him as the kind of person who never laughed or had any kind of fun. He and Usagi really antagonized each other for most of the first season until they were forced to reveal their alter egos in front of each other, and then he was kidnapped and almost killed and brainwashed and all that fun, happy stuff. And after all that, they decided that they loved each other. Except they realized at the last minute, and then he died, and then the whole mind wipe thing happened, and then the Doom Tree arc happened, and then we got back to their memories, and then it's like 4 episodes of happiness, and then the breakup, and then it was a very tumultuous start to this relationship. In the anime, he was very distant and cool, and he had all these haikus memorized for the heat of battle, and you know that he spent all that time writing them himself, and that's really where the dweeby dorky characteristics come through. And he did have a couple of moments here and there where he showed more open affection for Usagi, but for the most part it was like they're sitting on a park bench and he's reading a book and she's talking and he's just kind of ignoring her for the most part. And like when she would try to, you know, kiss him or hold hands with him or something, he would kind of panic or just act really exasperated with her. Plus his clothes, oh my god, let your girlfriend spend all the money that you clearly have and buy you a new wardrobe instead of wearing this all the time when you fight crime in white tie evening attire. And again, maybe this is just the fact that he had flaws that were never really fleshed out in the manga. The fact that his flaws were fleshed out in such a negative way, I would probably put some money on the first director of the series. The popular rumor is that he liked Rei and Usagi's relationship so much and he wanted everybody else to ship them as much as he did, so he just kind of threw Mamoru's characterization under the bus and we were left with what I've just described to you. And though this does have some validity to it, Mamoru does spend a fair bit of time in the manga as this quiet, stoic individual who has a pretty hefty internal monologue running along. He's supposed to be very stoic and introverted, but like Batman, some things that look really good on paper don't always translate well to the screen. In the heat of battle, which is kind of how we see him most of the time in the manga, you're running on a lot of adrenaline and you don't have a lot of time to think about what you're doing. In the anime, since we have a lot more downtime, we see him as I have just described to you. If we had had that downtime in the manga, maybe we would have also seen him being kind of cool and distant. But at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, a couple of times Usagi did kind of feel like he was pulling away from her and she felt sad about it and they talked about it. like a real relationship. We had so many moments in the manga where they just like talked about their relationship and how to make different things work when they were having problems, and we had 3 times as much screen time in the anime and not so much. And that is ultimately where the manga wins out in this characterization, because we just feel like in the anime that they're just together because destiny says so, rather than it being a free will thing. Now perhaps if the anime had also had a couple of moments where we had Mamoru's internal monologue, as we did with the manga on a couple of occasions, we might have seen that he too was just as much invested in this relationship, but again, we didn't have that, and please just let us have a couple of moments of looking into the brain of Mamoru Chiba, and maybe in 2014 we will not have this much of a problem with portraying a healthy relationship. However, the one thing that does remain a constant throughout all of the adaptations is that Mamoru is not good at buying presents. On multiple occasions he bought presents for Usagi and Chibiusa that tried to kill everybody. He bought these watches from an actual hooded figure, and everybody else was like, why would you do that? What made you think that was a good idea? And in the anime...
ごめんなさい、マモちゃん。
探しましたよ、お姫様。さあ、サイズが合うか確かめていただきましょう。
マモちゃん、ありがとう。
なんだ。
So next week we will dive in with the inner senshi. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys next week. Bye.